Welcome to Leaders of the West, a podcast for innovators and changemakers. I'm your host, Jessie Jarvis, the founder of the West, and I'm sitting down with agriculturalists, entrepreneurs, executives, and everyone in between with the goal of digging into the strategies, mindsets, and lessons that have been crucial to the success of ag and Western. Whether you're carrying on the next generation of your family's operation, starting something from scratch, or determined to climb up the leadership ladder, we're going to inspire you to continue to dream big, growing not just you, but the future of agriculture and Western as a whole. Let's go. Jena, I am absolutely thrilled to have you on here today. This has been a long time coming, and we are going to talk about a variety of stuff, but a lot of that stems from your personal health journey and that of your family's personal health journey as well. So to start this out, I really think it's important for people to hear your backstory. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, how you grew up? You became a nurse, so you obviously have that medical background, and how you've also then transitioned into full-time life as a farm wife and mom, in addition to all the other things that you do as a business owner and a podcaster.
Yeah, I'll try to deliver the abridged version. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Levi asked me last night who I was recording with, and I was like, it's Jessie Jarvis. Do you remember meeting her at NFR? I said I was actually so honored that she asked me to come be on the podcast. So thank you. It is truly an honor. But my name is Jena Ochsner, and I am from South Central Nebraska. I did not grow up on a farm. I was exposed to it. My dad grew up on a farm. My grandma is 97. She lived on the farm until 3 years ago, and she moved into assisted living, but she's still very independent. So I was around it, but definitely not immersed in it. And I actually had really big plans to not even live in Nebraska. I thought I'd be a big city girl and go to medical school and live far away from Nebraska. Not because I didn't love it, but because I just saw myself in a city for some reason. God has a really funny way of humbling us. And after my freshman year of college, I got out of a bad relationship and I was like, I'm ready to be free, travel, do the things. And I met my husband 12 hours later, and I'm not exaggerating. And so I still did my undergrad and had plans. I shifted from medical school to PA school, mainly because I was nannying for a physician my freshman year. And I felt like I saw her kids more than she did. She had a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and her husband would have to go to the hospital to get her breast milk to bring back to me so I could feed the baby. And I was like, I can't imagine living that life. So thought I'd try PA school. Long story short, I was going to school for nutrition and exercise science as a kind of degree to get my way into the medical field. And then my husband and I got married when I had 1 year of my undergrad left. And so I was going to finish that year of undergrad, apply for PA school. I had this perfect plan. Well, again, humbled very quickly by the Lord. And we got pregnant 6 months after getting married. And so I actually graduated my undergrad when I was pregnant with our oldest son, Stetson. I kind of pivoted again and still knew I wanted to do something in healthcare because I had a passion for that. And it would be a great way for me to provide health insurance for my family, which is something that I'm sure, as you're aware, can be very expensive for farming, ranching, entrepreneur families. So I pivoted and I did an accelerated nursing program. So when Stetson was 3 months old, I started that program. It's a second bachelor's degree in 11 months. If I knew I was going to be a nurse, I would have taken a much simpler route, but it was a good thing for me to pivot to. I fell in love with labor and delivery when I was in nursing school, and that was the only thing I wanted to do. I was like, I'm going to apply for that job and I don't have a backup plan, so I really hope they like me and hire me. I did get hired and I worked full-time as a labor and delivery nurse for 5 years. In the midst of all that, I am working full-time. We have 1 kid and I have full-time night shift, which that'll be important later. I have days off and I get back on my day schedule on my when I'm not working, and I'm like, I have all this extra time. What should I do? And my husband was teaching me things that I could do to help him around the farm. And I was like, this is great. I'm more than happy to power wash and drive equipment and do this and that. I'm very capable, but I also feel like I have potential and the capability to do something that could actually diversify the income for our family. Because we had goals and dreams, and I was like, what we're currently doing isn't going to get us where we want to be. So we need to flex somewhere. Around the same time, we had some friends that their family vacation in Florida, and they said they went to a farmer's market and they bought ground beef for $10 a pound. This is 2018. So it's before prices are really crazy. And we're in rural Nebraska where ground beef was maybe $3 a pound. And so it was whoa, how could we sell our ground beef for $10 a pound? So this is where I first kind of started diversifying and taking baby steps, not baby steps that I knew would lead me away from my career, but eventually did. We started a direct-to-consumer beef business out of that. I went to a retreat to learn about shipping perishables, and that's where I was kind of introduced to sharing on social media and using that as a leveraging marketing tool. I started sharing on social media with the sole purpose to build a community that I could then turn into customers that would buy beef from us. And then I quickly learned that there was a lot of other opportunities on social media. I met incredible people, other women in ag, and started working with ag brands doing influencer work and paid partnerships, kind of diversified again. And then somewhere along the lines and all that, we had our second child, and I had a history of migraines, but just kind of accepted it. But my pregnancies were really hard. And then my in-laws start stepping back from the farm a little bit. We're taking on more responsibility. I was just like in this insane state of overwhelm where there was like way too much going on. I had headaches every single day. This spiraled into my health journey, which we're going to get into. Then at that point, I kind of shifted away from working so much. I worked part-time, then PRN. Now I don't work as a labor nurse at all anymore. And I'm just full-time on the farm and running these businesses that we started.
Well, you absolutely like perfectly set this up because, again, as mentioned, there are a lot of different threads that make up who you are. And obviously, one of the things I kind of already shared this a little bit ago, but today I really do want to talk about your personal and family's health journey. Mm-hmm. You and Mary Pat actually talked about this on your podcast, Beyond the Crops. So if you guys want like the full nitty-gritty version, there are 2 awesome episodes. You're going to have to correct me on this. I feel like one of them is specifically about your health journey and migraines, and then Stetson with Lyme disease. And then the other one is much more related to foods that you consume and like non-toxic products and kind of what you bring into your house. Is that right? I feel like I listened to these and it's been almost a year ago that you guys recorded these. So
yes. So there is one that covers my health journey and my son's with Lyme disease. And then one that we kind of went nitty gritty on artificial food dyes. I think that's maybe the one that you're thinking about.
Yes.
And then there's also a 2-part series where we interviewed my functional medicine provider that is kind of part of the health story. And there's a ton of great information in there about low tox living and kind of this health journey and this kind of spiral that the United States is in and the unhealthy population. So those are good listens too.
Okay, so you guys, I will tell you, pause the show, make sure you go follow Beyond the Crops, add those episodes to like what's next in this in case this is your first endeavor with Jena. Now we're going to take a time in, if you will, now that you've done that. And I do really think that it's important to hear about this journey because I think a lot of people and a lot of Americans are faced with health issues. Mm-hmm. I myself am one of them. I have been a type 1 diabetic since I was 12 years old. So for more than 20 years, I know I could not live without modern medicine. I am a big believer in modern medicine. However, I also think that there are a lot of other things that we can be doing. Maybe modern medicine isn't necessarily the full ticket, if you will. I personally, and this is my personal thought, I believe in a healthy blend of both, but I think you have a really unique a perspective because you were a labor and delivery nurse. Like you have gone through a college education in the medical field. So you have that knowledge, but you also know what you and your family have experienced and how functional medicine has been a huge part of how you guys can now live your days pain-free, health-free, like in the place that you are. So today, I really want to like bring those together and share that story, but that's kind of like where I'm coming from and I think kind of where you are coming from too, in just like providing more awareness and education for people that like you can go ask your own questions or find your own answers. That doesn't mean that you're one-sided or that you're against one way of thinking or one specific practice. So can you kind of talk a little bit about your journey with migraines and then Stetson's journey with Lyme disease?
Yes. And I love that you pointed out like modern medicine is so important, especially in an acute setting or a chronic disease like yours, where it does need to be managed. I always say like it feels like holistic medicine, functional medicine, and modern medicine are separate teams and they're not friends. And I just think if everybody was friends and everybody thought we could work together, like such amazing things could happen. My family's the same way, where we are very reliant on modern medicine. My husband, both of my in-laws and two of my children have a heart condition that requires them to be very closely monitored. And modern medicine has definitely like saved some members of our family. So it's very important. I don't ever want somebody to think I'm anti-modern medicine, because I'm definitely not. I just think I have some qualms with it. But
I'm right there with you.
So growing up, I feel like I would get headaches more than the average kid. Like I remember, like now that I'm a mom, like when my kids get a headache, I'm like, well, drink more water. Come on. And I remember my mom was a teacher, and I remember in elementary school sometimes going to her room for Tylenol or something because I would just get more frequent headaches. Then when I was in college, I very, very vividly remember my very first migraine. It was on Christmas break of my sophomore year. I was dating Levi. I was at his grandma's house. We had some red wine, and I kind of thought the red wine gave me a migraine. I don't know if that's necessarily what the trigger was, but that's kind of where the migraine started. And then that kind of spiraled into a point in my junior year of college where I probably had 24 to 25 headache days a month, where it's like debilitating. Like my migraine is so out of control, but I just kind of had to learn to power through that because I was like trying to get my degree, and I was working 3 jobs to try to pay for said degree. And it was just like this crazy cycle of headaches that I was in. I want to back up a little bit because my journey did kind of start a little bit before that. When I was 17, I was a junior in high school and I got hit by a drunk driver. So I was stopped at a stoplight, and I had this like little tiny Chevy Cavalier. It was bright yellow. It's like laughable to talk about it, but it's like a little pop can car, 100% plastic. And I got plowed from the back by this big like 1980s old solid metal Chevy pickup. He actually hit me twice because I went flying into the intersection, and then he kept driving and hit me again. And then he drove off. It was a hit and run. The airbags on my car did not deploy, and they probably should have. And so I hit my head, like a pretty blunt hit on the steering wheel 2 times. I didn't go to the ER that night. I was like, fine. And I had really bad whiplash the next day. And my parents did end up taking me to get a CT of my head a few days later, but no one ever thought about my neck or anything. So fast forward to college, I'm getting all these migraines. We go to neurologists and different things. They have me on medication, trying different things. Nothing's truly helping. I even asked the neurologist once, like, okay, what's the game plan here? I'm like 20 years old. I don't want to be on meds for the rest of my life that are barely working. And the response I kind of got was, well, if your headaches are really that bad, taking a few pills every day for the rest of your life really shouldn't bother you. I remember that not sitting well with my mom, but we were also like, taught to trust what the doctors say, like, okay, like this is normal. So I kind of go through this crazy cycle of trying different specialists, different doctors. I was dating Levi, like I said, and his family was pretty holistic already, and they were seeing a naturopath in Colorado. So I actually went to Colorado with my future in-laws, but we're just my boyfriend's parents at the time. And he couldn't come because they had cows and he was calving, so he had to stay home. So it was like literally me and just my boyfriend's parents. And kind of made some dietary changes and tried some different supplements. And like I kept like doing little band-aids, but like nothing was truly helping my migraines. And at one point in college, I decided, I don't even remember who recommended it, but I went gluten-free for a while. And it did start to help. Gluten was definitely a trigger. But it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be a trigger 100% of the time, but probably like 90% of the times. Every once in a while, I would eat something with gluten in it and I'd still get a headache. So it like wasn't making sense. That's an important piece, and I'll like connect that puzzle piece in a few minutes. So fast forward a little bit. I'm gluten-free. We get married. I'm still gluten-free. I get pregnant, and now I'm having headaches every single day. And I'm like, what in the world? I am still eating really well. Like, how come my headaches are so out of control again? It took me a few years to put the pieces together. But in that moment, I'm like, well, if I'm going to get a headache anyways, like I'm going to eat the donut and the mac and cheese. Like I haven't had gluten in so long, and it sounds amazing. So I kind of start eating gluten again and don't really notice any difference because I'm still getting headaches every day. So this goes on. I have Stetson. My headaches are like barely not controlled. They're in and out. I'm taking rescue medications, but the rescue medication I was on, you could only get 9 of them a month. So I was kind of in this, like I have to very strategically choose if I do get a headache, which 9 days of the month, I don't want to be absolutely miserable. And then I become a nurse. I start working full-time nights. Like night shift is not conducive to headache. Like it definitely does not promote a headache-free lifestyle. And then I get pregnant with our second kid. Again, my headaches are 100% out of control. Every single day of my pregnancy, I have one of the worst headaches in the world. And have Crawford, our second, and then go back to working full-time nights. This is where like that spiral starts to happen where I'm like incredibly overwhelmed. Like there's too much on our plate. Around that, Crawford is, I don't know, a little over a year old. And so I've kind of like gone through the postpartum hair loss. I feel like my hair is coming back. But then it's like all of a sudden I feel like I have no hair. And like my friends started noticing like, where did all your hair go? It's like I have this regrowth. And I could show you a picture. It's alarming, Jesse. Like I was not a lot of hair left. So Levi's kind of like, what is going on with you? Like, this is crazy, Jena. Like you're so miserable. Your hair's falling out. Like your body's screaming at us. We need to figure something out. So in October it would have been 2021, we reached out to this functional medicine provider that we had heard about from Levi's aunt. They were like 5 months out there. They couldn't get us until March. So March rolls around and we're like finally ready to go. I get sick on and off. When the family gets sick, I seem to be sicker longer than anybody else. But we don't really think anything of it. But if you're not familiar with functional medicine, it kind of like really deep dives your health history. It's not like modern medicine is very much like, what's your ailment? I'm going to give you a pharmaceutical to fix that one thing right now. Functional medicine is like peeling back all the layers, finding what's causing that, and then healing that root cause. So it's like very much a journey. So we start peeling back the layers. I test positive for the MTHFR mutation, which if you haven't heard of that, it's a mutation that it affects your methylation. So methylation is how you process different nutrients and stuff. One of those nutrients being folate, which I'm going to connect a piece of the puzzle for you now. So the American diet doesn't get a whole lot of folate. And so back, I think it was in the 70s, it was argued that folate was really important to prevent neural tube defects in infants. And most mothers weren't on a prenatal vitamin that contained folic acid, the artificial form of folate, prior to pregnancy. So they started enriching our grains with it. So like if you look at a label and it says enriched wheat flour or whatever, cereals, crackers, almost everything in a mainstream grocery store will have folic acid in it. Somebody like me who has the MTHFR mutation, methylation's blocked and my body already has a hard time processing nutrients. And then where the artificial nutrients enter that methylation chain, it's like too late. So my body has no way my provider kind of described it as like, say you have a good interstate, 2 lanes, both ways, everything's open. If you have 1 copy of the MTHFR, 2 of those lanes are closed. If you have 2 copies like me, now 3 of those lanes are closed. So it's like my body can only methylate at like 33% capacity as what maybe a person without the mutation can. So it's already harder for me to methylate those nutrients. And then I really have no capability to methylate the artificial form of those nutrients. So I am control my headaches with gluten. And now what do you take when you're pregnant? They have you take
your prenatal,
which has folic acid in it. And they're really big on taking supplemental folic acid. So once I kind of learned about this, it was like, oh my goodness, that's why my first 2 pregnancies were so miserable, because I was literally supplementing what I thought I needed for my baby. And it was like so detrimental to my actual health and was like the biggest migraine trigger that I could have had.
Wow
is right.
You had gone to this functional medicine doctor.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that you mentioned was that you had tested positive for that gene mutation.
Yes. And the MTHFR mutation, it's really common. And it's not like a scary thing. I just think it's good to be aware of it because then you know how you can just nurture and fuel your body better. We did a very comprehensive blood panel, a very comprehensive stool study to kind of like your immune system starts in your gut, like your gut health's very important. And my gut was in bad shape. Like I was super inflamed. My labs actually resembled those of a Crohn's patient. She was like, Jena, if you had blood in your stool, I'd make you get a colonoscopy. But since you don't have blood in your stool, I really just think it's like crazy inflamed. We've got a lot going on. We need to get under control. And one of the questions she asked was, when you get sick, or like, how long do you stay sick? And my family would get a cold and then I'd have just a nagging cough for 6 weeks. And I just like never thought anything of it, but it was just, my gut was so inflamed. My good bacteria were shot. I had too much bad bacteria. And just when I would get something, my immune system just didn't have the manpower to fight it off. So this was the summer of 2022, like spring, summer of that year, where I started doing this detox process. It was very overwhelming. And it was like, okay, I'm taking the supplements. Why don't I feel better? But then it's a journey. Like I said, you kind of have to think about, I was now 30 at this point, like the 30 years leading up to this, I wasn't fueling my body correctly. Like I can't just undo that in a couple of weeks.
Exactly. Well, and I think too, that's one of those things like we always think like, oh, I'm going to take this for a couple of weeks and I'm going to feel better. It can take like 6 months before your body, you can notice a difference from taking something. Like you really have to stick with it in order to know yes or no, it's working or it's not.
Yes. And so she also, and while detoxing and supplementing with the thing, I was just way depleted in everything, which is why like my hair was falling out because my body was like, girl, we're just trying to keep your organs alive. Your hair doesn't matter right now. We're going to flesh that. And so it was a really long process of that. And it was like kind of discouraging. Like I would be bloated all the time. And she did really encourage me to go 100% gluten-free and dairy-free while I was doing this detox process to just really eliminate all of those inflammatory things to give my gut a break. I was really resistant to it. Gluten-free is easy. I've been there. Like I said, I've done the gluten-free thing. The dairy was hard for me. I was like, no, like I heart dairy farming. I believe in dairy. I am not giving up dairy. And so I would kind of have butter here and there or cheese here and there, but then like I'd make progress and then like my bowels would be out of control and I'd feel miserable. So I'm like, okay, Jena, just commit to the process. Like I'm this deep, just commit. So I did go completely gluten, completely dairy free for a while until I kind of like got my gut healed. I have reintroduced dairy since, and we eat mostly raw dairy now, and that my family tolerates it a lot better. And so I felt like I was almost completely detoxed. And I was like to the point where I was going to try a food sensitivity test to really like figure out what foods I should be avoiding. Because the way she explained it was if you take a food sensitivity test too early and you have leaky gut and your gut's too inflamed, it's going to just tell you that you're really ultra sensitive to like the foods you've had for the last 2 weeks. So she's like, let's get your gut healed and then we'll try that food sensitivity test. I ended up getting pregnant with our third child. So I didn't really get to finish the detox process. But now I'm pregnant and I can nurture my body differently. I had maybe 3 very mild headaches that entire pregnancy because I wasn't taking folic acid. I was nurturing my body with like methyl vitamins, methylfolate, eating well. It was just crazy the differences in my pregnancies. Even the deliveries of my first 2 were so hard. My recoveries were terrible. My swelling was out of control. I couldn't pee after either one of the first 2 deliveries. My third one, like I peed within an hour, minimal swelling. I was walking around right away. I bonded with my baby better. Like it's crazy the difference that it made because my body was healthy.
Wow.
Wild.
That is just unreal. So kind of at the same time though, your oldest son, Stetson, is having his own set of like health issues.
Yes. So we were still in the process of like the detoxing, the healing. I'm not pregnant yet. And we are having issues with Stetson. But I was just kind of telling myself, it's a phase. It's a phase. He's 4 years old. This is what 4-year-olds do.
Well, and with your first kid, you don't really know either. Like this is your first rodeo.
Yes. I did have a few red flags, like things I was just like, this is weird. Because early on, when we were still doing all of the vaccines, he would get a shot. We'd go to the doctor's office and it'd be like, no big deal. And then I remember him getting a shot like a year or 2 later. And it was like, he's crawling under the table, crawling up the wall, like acting like a crazy person. And then, like I mentioned, my husband has a heart condition. We actually found out that my husband had that heart condition when I was pregnant with our second. So then they got very interested in our family and they wanted everybody to get genetic tested. That's a really long story for another day, but my in-laws both have the same genetic mutation for the same heart condition. And we found that out just a few years ago. We knew that one of his parents had it because my husband's 2 younger brothers had this heart condition. We found out they must have inherited a copy from each parent. My husband only inherited one, which is why his didn't present at birth like his brothers. And so we take Stetson to get tested for this mutation. And he is like 3.5 years old. And we just talk him through it. I'm like, they're going to do a little poke. It's just really important that we know that we get your blood so that we can know if your heart's okay. It'll just hurt for a tiny little bit, but you're so brave. I know you can do it. So he puts his arm out. They poke him. He like, oh, like maybe has a tear or two. But then he was like, oh, that wasn't so bad, Mom. Handled it like a champ. Then I told you like I had seen some other red flags. He started doing like a lot of weird tics. He would like sniff his fingers all the time or he'd like do his weird things with his face. He had like a series of different tics, but they'd kind of come and go. He started wetting the bed again, and he was like completely potty trained and hadn't wet the bed in a long time. He all of a sudden was like super anxious with separation anxiety with my husband and my mother-in-law. He would also get really scared about things a 4-year-old shouldn't be scared about. Like we'd be leaving like, oh, Mom, wear your seatbelt. Don't get in a wreck. Don't get a flat tire. Just make sure you're safe. Like things a 4-year-old shouldn't necessarily be thinking about. And I was like, this is weird that he's so anxious all of a sudden, but wasn't really connecting the dots. Then we start talking to our functional medicine provider and I'm like, I just feel like maybe I want to bring Stetson to you. Like maybe this is more than maybe more than just a 4-year-old phase. So she started asking like, has he ever been bitten by a tick and this and that? And I'm like, he actually did. One time we found like a big old dog tick in his hair and we like just missed it. It'd been there a while. It was like fat and nasty. We took the tick out, like didn't really think anything of it. Never saw a rash or anything. And she was like, Lyme disease is a lot more common than you're kind of led to believe. So like, let's just bring him in. We'll test for all the things. So we bring him in and he's had a blood draw before years prior. Now he's older, more mature. And it took 3 adults to hold him down to draw his blood. Like it was terrible. I actually remember her saying like, we don't have to do this. Like we can let it go. And I'm like, this is our one chance to like figure out what's going on with him. There's no way I'm getting him ever to a point where he gets poked again. So like, we just have to do it. So it was terrible, but I knew it was like what we had to do. And then he did come back positive for Lyme disease. So at this point, he had a diagnosis for PANS. I feel like it's more common than we're led to believe. It's like super underdiagnosed, I think. So there's PANS and there's PANDAS. PANS is pediatric acute neuropsychiatric syndrome. More people have heard of PANDAS, which is pediatric acute neuropsychiatric disorder associated with strep. So what it is, it's kind of this laundry list of symptoms that can reappear. And like I kind of mentioned a lot of them, the tics, the anxiety, the wetting the bed. Like if you look up the symptoms for them, Stetson had every single one of them. But in order to qualify, you have to have this underlying viral load of some kind. So for PANDAS kids, it's strep, but for PANS, it can be any other virus. And so for Stetson, it was Lyme. So that was a really, I don't know, it was like a really hard moment for me. I felt like I'd kind of failed him as a mom. Like, I can't believe it took me this long to figure it out. But my provider actually, in our process of doing our own functional medicine journey, she had told us about her family, and her daughter had PANS and had Lyme disease. And so when she was telling me about her daughter, that's when I was like, what is going on with Stetson? So I was kind of a basket case when I figured out, like found the Lyme. I'm like, oh my goodness, is he ever going to be the same kid? And she's like, you caught it early. It's fine. There's a lot of things that we can do. So I'm really happy to report now he's going to actually turn 8 years old tomorrow. So when this airs, he'll have already been 8. He's kind of detoxed for a year. And then we hit some different roadblocks and had to try some different peptide therapies, and now we're actually doing homeopathy with him, which that's like a whole nother conversation, but it's really fun to nerd out about. And he's been seeing a homeopath for right at a year, and the strides that he has made are unbelievable. He takes a remedy and it kind of nudges his body to heal himself. And so going this method, they say that like his immune system will eventually completely heal from the PANS and from the Lyme disease, and he'll just be a normal kid someday.
That is absolutely amazing.
It really is.
That is wild. So in addition to Lyme disease, though, you also realized that your children have, I'm going to botch the word here because I feel like I'm just so invested into this that now I'm not even thinking clearly, but sensitivities to food dyes.
Yes. So that was part of, he's having like behavior issues, a couple other things that I should have mentioned that he was experiencing. All of a sudden, he's really sensitive to the sun, and he's really sensitive to sounds. Like his preschool teacher will send me pictures inside, and he always has a hood up. And I think he was like trying to muffle the sound and anytime they did instruments, she said he would get really overwhelmed. And then he'd be going outside to do something with Levi or go to the pasture for the day, and he's wearing sunglasses and a hat, and he can still hardly stand. He's squinting. He can like hardly stand the sun outside. Like that was all like new things. And as we're working with the functional medicine provider through his detox, she's like, we got to clean up what he's eating. Like we really need to make sure his system's getting things that encourage a healthy brain, because with PANS and PANDAS kids, they kind of call it brain on fire. Like their brain, the overload of toxins is just like way too high. And then that could be a trigger. So we realized that dye and folic acid were definitely triggers for his brain on fire. Like that was, if we were even at a good point where we're kind of like not having to walk on eggshells so much, if he had dye or folic acid, would be like an instant reaction out of control. The dye one was, I always said I would never be that mom that like doesn't let their kids have food dye. Like that's crazy. Live a little 80-20, yada, yada. But we were so desperate to try anything. Like it was pure desperation that one day I'm like, okay, we're eliminating all of the dye from our house. I'm going to read every single label. I need to give this kid a fighting chance. And at first we were pretty just like, we'll control what happens in our house. And then he'd go to his grandparents for a day or an afternoon, or he'd go to school and he'd come home and he would just like fall off the rails. And it would be like 3 days to bounce back from it. And it was like, what is going on? And then we kind of, we'd like back up to what he ate. And it would always be, he would had like a sucker or fruit snacks or something that had dye in it. So we finally got to the point where we're like, okay, this is not worth it for our family anymore. So we're going to just tell the grandparents and tell the teachers, I don't care if you want to give my kid crap food. Here's the junk food that I approve of, like the dye-free versions. If you don't want to purchase that, that's totally fine. I am more than willing to provide it for you. So we get rid of dye. So like, he's not eating Gatorade or drinking any of sports drinks or stuff like that. I just wanted to get calories and electrolytes in him because the kid's skinny. So I started letting him have body armor instead of, like a Gatorade. And I was talking to our PA about it. And she was like, well, I'm pretty sure body armor has folic acid in it, because I was kind of lax on the folic acid thing. It was like we're going to like fight one battle at a time. And sure enough, body armor has folic acid in it. That was kind of the last thing in my house that had folic acid. So we removed that, and it's like no longer a trigger anymore. So now, or it was no longer a problem because that trigger was out of our house. So like me, he has the MTHFR mutation. Let me be completely clear. Folic acid isn't really good for anybody. But then when you do have the MTHFR mutation, you're just more likely to maybe see a symptom from it. So since Stetson's immune system was so fragile and has had this brain on fire going on, anytime he had any of those little things that his body really couldn't process well, it was like an instant trigger for his behaviors to fall off the rails.
Yeah, it would just like make it that much worse.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Fuel on the fire in that sense.
Yes. And I was just I have pure confidence in being crazy about it. I don't care at all if people would make comments, or I would maybe assume people were thinking different things. And it's like, if you experienced or saw what I experienced in my household, you would be the same way I am. Like, I can't unsee like how hard those things were on him and then how much better he is without them.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think too, again, and I know that everybody listening to this by now understands, like, we're not dogging on modern medicine. We're not dogging on functional medicine. We're not dogging on mainstream products. We're not like, it is purely just a conversation, right? Like, you go to the store though, and you think like, oh, well, I'm going to, like, the things in here are good for my family. Like, I'm going to buy my Cheez-Its and I'm going to buy my Gatorade and like all of these things. But in reality, maybe they're not as great for us as we are like led to believe.
I agree 100%. And the thing is, I have a degree in nutrition. And so we didn't really learn about folic acid and MTHFR and food dyes and all of that. But, I learned a lot about shopping in the grocery store correctly and sticking to the outskirts of the store and avoiding the middle aisles and all of that. And now that is truly how my family shops. Like, we stick to really whole raw foods, but we still do have junk food. I just can't buy them at my local small town grocery store. I have to order them from Thrive Market or somewhere else where I know that the ingredients are clean. So it kind of started with me eliminating food dyes, and then it was eliminating folic acid. And now I'm kind of to the point during my detox, I wasn't eating anything with dairy or gluten or dye or anything like that, but I would still sometimes get really bloated and feel icky. Well, you can still eat potato chips because they're dairy-free, gluten-free. Well, what are those cooked in? They're cooked in inflammatory oils like vegetable oil. So now we're kind of to the point where we're kind of hardcore, and I've eliminated all of those inflammatory oils out of my house too.
Okay, but I want to talk about that too, because as somebody who has kind of gone down that journey as well, it is overwhelming.
It's very overwhelming.
Over freaking whelming to start. And you are somebody who you've been in this journey for years now, or the last 3 years. And so I think that you can be a great resource for, like, these are the simple swaps that I've made for people. So I do want to get to that. But first, I want to talk about how you've made those swaps, or like how you've talked to your children about eliminating that. Because I can imagine a lot of people listening, myself included. My kids love Cheez-Its. How did you encourage your children, or like help them understand, like, hey, this stuff doesn't make you feel great, and you want to be able to fuel yourself and make yourself feel great?
So honestly, we use almost those exact words. There was a time where it was like shortly after my grandpa died, and, grandparents love to hand out junk food, especially at a gathering when there's a bunch of kids. So my dad's like handing out fruit snacks to all these kids. And so I don't even know how many packs of fruit snacks Stetson had. And we come home and he's a disaster. And then he's like puking. My kids are all easy pukers. It's one of my least favorite traits. I don't know where they inherited that from. But he'd always puke. He'd get upset and he'd puke. And then it would be like, okay, did you like how you felt last night? Was that a good feeling? No, I didn't like it at all. And it's like, well, it's really important what we put into our bodies, and some of those food choices that we made, like, that's why we feel that way. With Stetson, by the time we got to the point, now he's almost 8, so the conversations are really easy, but it was really just truly like when he's in the moment and kind of feeling out of control and feeling like acting like I know is not him. We start the conversation. They're like, do you like how you're feeling right now? Because how you're feeling right now is really directly related to what you put into your body. That is why we stay away from these foods. Stetson totally recognizes it and knows that it makes him feel icky, and he won't even, if he even questions something, he won't eat it. Like, at one example I've used at his Christmas program last year, there was a bunch of cookies after the program, and then there was lemonade. And my friend said, Stetson was so sweet. I saw him just sitting there with a little cup of water because he went through the line, and he was like, I don't know if I can have any of this. Well, she had made sourdough cookies that were all ingredients that she knew he could have. So she said, Stetson, I made a sourdough cookie. You can eat that. And he was like, are you serious? And so he is very self-aware now that those things don't make him feel good. With his little brother, it was a little bit harder, and we were a little bit more lax with him because he wouldn't have the severe reactions that Stetson had. But we live in the same house, so we just kind of hold everybody to the same standard. So Crawford was to the point where, he hasn't had any of these toxins in his body for a really long time. And then he was at preschool once, and we pick him up on every other Thursday. We take him out to lunch after preschool, and he is acting like a crazy person in the restaurant. Like the little plastic container that has the sugar in it for the coffee, he like picks it up and he dumps it out and he throws it and he's like yelling and just like not acting like our kid at all. And we're like, what is happening with you? And you're like, buddy, what'd you eat at school? Did you eat the snack I packed? Yeah. I'm like, anything else? And he's like, yeah, my teacher gave me a blue sucker. And it was like that one dumb sucker made him go off the rails because his body had been like so free of it for so long that when he did have it, it was like, whoa. So he understands now too, and he's only 4 years old. Literally 2 weeks ago, they got a haircut. It was right after school. Another stylist had her kids there, and so her kids were eating snacks and they were playing, and they were eating mini Oreos. And the little girl said, Crawford, do you want some Oreos? And I heard him, my 4-year-old, from the back of the salon say, is there dye or folic acid in those? And I about died. I was like, oh my gosh, slightly embarrassing, also very proud in the same moment, because I think just including them in the conversation in like the healthy foods, we talk a lot about God's garden too. Like, what did God give us on this earth? Like, he provided the animals for us to have food and milk, and he provided the fruits and the vegetables. Like, when we're eating foods that aren't on that, what was kind of basic put on the earth for basic human needs, like that's where things can kind of start to get hard on our bodies.
I think that that's a perfect way of really starting that conversation. And also including your kids in the process as far as like when you take them grocery shopping, like help them understand like, okay, the outside aisles, the produce, for some families, dairy or meat, like whatever that is, like these are good areas. So like, do you want to pick what we eat? And then when you get on Thrive again, because you can filter by like the things that you want to eliminate, then like, okay, which of these snacks looks good, so that they get to feel involved in that process. So that then when they have to make those swaps at home, are like, well, why are we eating this instead of that? Like, well, you picked that when we shopped online. So on that topic though, let's say that somebody is looking to make some product swaps, or they just want to maybe educate themselves more about what is in the products that they're currently using. Like maybe they don't have these severe reactions, or they don't have a gene mutation or any of these things, but they're like, well, what is in the stuff that I'm consuming and using in my home? Where are places that you went to learn more about various ingredients or just do more personal research in general?
The personal research was very much trial and error as far as what foods in our house. I was actually talking to a friend recently, and she's trying to eliminate things. Any kids, I feel like if you look at the public school system and the foods that they are fed, I feel like if there wasn't so much folic acid and so much dye in the school lunches, I feel like the behavior issues could be sliced in half. Like, it's crazy what kids are getting fed at school. And so she was talking about this, and she was like, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. I said, I should just make a guide, shouldn't I? She's like, yes, take my money. I'll buy whatever guide you make. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have the time right now, but someday maybe that will come. For me, I kind of had, so like what was most important to me initially was the dye. So I would start with like one ingredient maybe. Like I said, it was so hard, but it was out of complete desperation. So it was easy for me to just literally throw away every single thing that had it in it. I know most people that's not realistic. So I would say either pick an ingredient like dye. Some people say, is it just red dye you avoid? Like, I avoid all of them. They're all made from petroleum, potential links to carcinogens, lots of links to behavior disorders. So I just avoid all of them. They're in everything. They're in cereals. They're in crackers. Anything colored that's not a natural brand will have dye in it. I've even found it in marshmallows, pickles, protein powders, beef sticks. Like, you can find it in places where you even think that you are getting a healthy food.
You would not expect it.
Right. Wouldn't expect it. Like a protein powder from like what's I would consider a health company. Some of their non-natural flavors have red dye in them, which was just asinine to me. Either pick one ingredient or tackle one food at a time. So if I was picking one ingredient, I would pick the dyes, and I would just like start with the fruit snacks, the cereals. If you were wanting to pick one pantry item, I think I would start with cereals because all of those have enriched grains in them and or dye as well. And even though this is where I said earlier where I was eating gluten-free, but sometimes I would still get a headache because if you have cornflakes or Cheerios, both gluten-free cereals, but they're still enriched with folic acid and the other enriched nutrients that they put in those, which are all synthetic and that our body can't really process. So the next time you go shopping, instead of getting like Cheerios, I would seek out an organic or natural brand or any brand that doesn't have enriched flour in it. You just have to get good at reading labels. I can pick out things that I don't want immediately. The dye, the folic acid, I stay away from MSG. Now the inflammatory oils. Tackle one thing at a time. So I do cereals, crackers, fruit snacks, and then you can just honestly go on from there. It's so frustrating because it's literally in everything.
It absolutely is. Because I have been, as I mentioned earlier, I've been much more in tune about just those general ingredients. For instance, a couple of nights ago, I was making pasta because now I'm at the point where I'm like looking at the things in our pantry that I already have and like, okay, I'll buy this again based on the ingredients, or no, after we use this, like I'm going to go find a substitute for it. And so it was the Berea pasta brand that you can buy at Walmart, anywhere, like blue box, red label. And it has 2 ingredients. And I was like, well, this is awesome. Well, then down below, there's a whole other section for vitamins and minerals. And that's where all of the enriched things are. So it's still enriched pasta. They don't actually include that in the ingredients. They have a whole other section for vitamins and minerals because they want to make it look like their pasta only has 2 ingredients in it.
Yeah.
And I'm not calling them out, but my whole point is, it can be really difficult to look at food labels. And you guys, I am somebody who I have read a food label since 2002. I can tell you the carbs in any product on this earth, probably. I know food labels. And it is still, now that I am in my mid-30s, food labels are just very deceitful. How about that?
They are very deceitful. I have a lot of feelings about food labeling in this country, not just on processed things, about, just meat and dairy too, but that's a whole nother podcast.
It is. We could be here all day. But one, that makes it hard for those of us who are trying to be conscientious of what we're feeding ourselves and feeding our families. 2, I think we need to give a whole lot more credit to just general consumers who are not as familiar with their food products and where they come from, because if those of us in agriculture are having a hard time finding stuff, I can only imagine how difficult it is. And that's where I'll stop on that topic.
Yes, it's overwhelming. It's difficult. And like I said, it would have been a lot harder for me if it wasn't out of pure desperation. Luckily, I feel like this is becoming a trend, and more people and more companies are starting to create products that are cleaner. The thing is, you can go gluten-free, but it's not going to eliminate all the folic acid. I gave some examples. But then also there are some brands that are using wheat, but they're using wheat in the wholest form and they're not enriching it. If 3 Farm Daughters is a company that they are wheat farmers in North Dakota and then they get pasta made, they were kind of on this same train, looking at these ingredients and all these quote unquote vitamins and minerals that are added that are artificial that our bodies can't process to simple things like pasta. So they just took their own wheat from their farm and made it into pasta. And the only ingredients are durum and semolina wheat. It's amazing. So you can find some products, if you do tolerate wheat, that aren't enriched. And I feel like you kind of have to seek them out now, but we are slowly getting to a point where they are more readily available, which is encouraging.
So on the topic of product swaps, what are some easy ones off the top of your head that you have made when it comes to food or consumable products? And the other one that I want to ask you about, because also too, things like Tylenol, those have a lot of dyes in them as well. And I know that you, in one of these past episodes on Beyond the Crops that I've told our listeners to go listen to, you had also mentioned that now you're just much more aware of how often you give your kids Tylenol and for what. But what types of product swaps have you made on the consumable side? And then we'll talk about the home cleaning products, that low tox side.
Yes. So, I still let my kids have fruit snacks, but their fruit snacks solely is a brand. There's these mango fruit strips where literally the only ingredient is mangoes. Yum Earth is another brand where they have fruit snacks, which still aren't great. I know they're not great for my kids' teeth. There could be better options, but there's at least not dye in them. I buy almost anything packaged or processed. I pretty much buy it off of Thrive Market, or Costco sometimes has some really great options without dye in it as well. And Viro Kids is a brand where they have a cereal that tastes and looks just like peanut butter Captain Crunch, but it doesn't have all the extra crap in it. Then, there's another brand. I have a post on it. They have a cereal that looks and kind of tastes like Fruit Loops, but it's actually high protein because it's milk based. And it's dyed with stuff like beet juice and carrot juice, things that come from the earth. That's really what food should be dyed with. I have a lot of issues with the food dye. It was just to appeal to little kids, and it's wild. My husband is always like, this should be criminal what they're putting in kids' food.
Agreed. Also, putting Paw Patrol on the fruit snacks. So that's what your kid wants to buy. Why don't we put Paw Patrol on the carrots? Wait. The other thing that I will say, we have a grocery outlet that is in the next town over. So where our Walmart is and our Albertsons. And I walked in there and I was actually pleasantly surprised by the amount of healthy type options that they had of products that I could find on Thrive. that I wasn't really expecting to find there. So if you are somebody who maybe you haven't stepped into your grocery outlet, if you have one of those around, definitely check that out because I was actually blown away by the amount of really healthy choices that they have.
It's a movement and it is a slow process, especially get to rural America, but it is slowly happening. I wanted to say one thing about packaged goods stuff. Like I said, I will fully admit we still let our kids have candy. We just swap with brands. Walmart is also a place, like even in their checkout aisle, where they prey on the vulnerable moms again who have crabby kids and I put all those snacks right there. Giggles is a brand. They have, I would say it's like a Starburst or a Skittles copycat, but it's dye-free. So even big box stores like Walmart are starting to have those options as well. But what I wanted to say was with my second got to the point where like he just wants to live off granola bars. And I'm like, you need to actually eat whole foods. So we kind of have a rule in our house now. If you want to have a snack, you need to have a whole food first, whether it's, I prefer it to be some form of protein like meat or a cheese stick or something, or a carrot, like something from the earth before you have something in a package. And then sometimes they'll complain about it, but it's like, well, I'm sorry, but if you're not going to eat the carrot, then you're really not that hungry.
As a mother of children, their meal stomach is never very large, but their snack stomach, like, oh, you don't want to eat your dinner. But if I say, oh, are you too full for dinner? Do you want ice cream? Yeah, I want ice cream. Like, oh, well, you must still have some room to finish that dinner. Like,
yeah. And kids are resilient. So you said your kids love Cheez-Its. Simple Mills, they have crackers, some of our favorite crackers. There's this rosemary sea salt one. Even my kids love it, even though it's rosemary. They're super good. And Simple Mills makes I think it's a farmhouse cheddar cracker, which is, I would say is maybe a Cheez-It lookalike that doesn't have all of those toxic ingredients in it. And the first time you buy it, they're going to be like, I don't like that because it doesn't taste like the Cheez-It. But if you just eliminate it from your house and just have the conversations like, well, the Cheez-Its really aren't fueling our body well. And we want to work really hard. Like God gave us this beautiful body. We need to treat it like the temple that it is and fuel it with things that are going to nurture us. I feel like if you have that conversation with kids and just say like, sorry, that's not going to be in our house anymore, they start to understand. And the more that they're away from that very addictive processed food, the less that they'll want it and the easier they'll be open to the healthy swaps. Peanut butter is the last thing that my kids really still fight me on. I stay away from the inflammatory oils, like I said now. And so the peanut butter that I buy, I get it at Thrive or Costco, and the only ingredients are peanuts and salt. And so it's a little bit different texture. It's not sweet because it doesn't have sugar in it, and it's not as creamy because it doesn't have the oil. And they still kind of complain about it, but they still eat it, and they're like slowly getting used to it.
Right. And I will say you are so spot on if kids are resilient because Jet is that same way now because we've talked to him about, what he consumes and just food in general. And like, no, you can't have an Oreo, go have a cheese stick and things like that. And when I give him an option of what to have, sometimes he'll ask me, Mommy, is that a protein? And I'm like, either yes, it is or no, it's not. But like, even at 6 years old, like if you start creating those conversations, they are absolutely going to be more in tune.
And I think they watch every move that we make. So they watch me read labels and make healthy choices. And I think they do catch on.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. So let's talk about some household, non-toxic, low toxic cleaning, household laundry. You're a farm mom. Like it's got to withstand the farm life and also work.
Yes, agreed. So I have always been a low to no fragrance person. Like I said, I have a history of headaches. I've always been very sensitive to very perfumey smells. I would still have the smells, but if it was like citrus, it was fine, or like vanilla. I'm to the point now where if it's an artificial fragrance, it's just not in my house. They're hormone disruptors. They're causing a lot of problems with early puberty in kids and just like adding to that toxic level. Like we kind of have always been taught like everything in moderation, but now we have like, some toxic fragrance, some toxic ingredient in our foods. Oh, there's plastics in our microplastics and like the containers that we're drinking and eating out of, like all of these little things in moderation all of a sudden pile up and like it's not in moderation anymore. Our bodies are like, our toxic cup is overflowing. So that is another thing where I just like, I'm no on the fragrance. So for my cleaning products, I use mostly exclusively either Thieves products from Young Living or Truly Free is kind of a newer healthy. I don't know if healthy is the right brand to use for cleaning products, like low toxin brand for cleaning products. And I do really like their dish soap. I didn't love their laundry detergent because even though it wasn't an artificial fragrance, it was still fragrant enough. Even though it was natural, I just didn't love it. So what I use for our laundry now is again, either the Thieves laundry soap from Young Living or the Molly's Suds. It's a powder detergent. And I have really liked that. And I do feel like it holds up pretty well to farm clothes. I am also not the wife that is going to try to get the exhaust fluid and the diesel and the oil out of his jeans. Like if they're no longer physically dirty where I touch them, it comes off on me, they're clean to me. So like his work clothes are stained and I'm fine with that.
I am the same way with the exception of grass stains.
Okay, that's fair.
I feel like with children, I don't know if this is like a little boy thing. I've never charted these waters before.
Right.
But I think all Jet does at recess in the day is like slide around on his dirty knees and he will come home with like a football field's worth of grass on his pants.
Yes.
And so I do work hard to get those stains out, but I'm the same way. Like, and I'll occasionally wash things a couple of times, but if after the second or third time I can't get it out, it's going to stay.
Yeah, it's going to stay. And I feel like I've never had an issue with grass stains. Like what I'm using is working to get those out. Branch Basics is another brand. I haven't used it, but I have crunchy friends that use it and it's a clean, non-toxic brand. So that'd be another one to check out as well.
And I have been using Nellie's laundry detergent.
Oh,
it is
I've never
like
heard
a
of
low
that.
toxic. Yeah, so you can get it at Costco, which I love.
Okay.
And it comes in like a 5-gallon tub. So I'm all about that.
Yes.
It's a powder form. And it's cleaned all of our clothes amazingly, just not the grass stains. So I use that Miss Mouth stain remover. And then is it Fells Napa?
Fells
like
Napa.
the bar? Fells
I
Napa.
have that
yeah,
as
the
well.
bar. But again, that's the only thing that I ever really struggle with is grass stains. But I think I have struggled with that regardless of what detergent I use. I will say that.
Kelly Foreman, she's on Instagram. I think it's Kodiak Goat Dairy. She has a goat dairy up in Kodiak, Alaska, and she is actually from Nebraska, from the teeny tiny town that I was born in. She maybe babysat me as a small child, so that was crazy. But she shared on Instagram once, she makes her own powder detergent using like baking soda and some other baking powder, I don't know, some other ingredients. And she makes like a big batch of her own detergent and she says it works like a dream. And like goat smell is a smell like no other. So if she's saying it works to get that out of their clothes, I would be a believer in it.
I would too. That's why I don't really like goat cheese because I just smell the goat.
You can taste.
For any of our goat farmers out there, I'm sorry. I still
love
you.
I did learn that good goat cheese, you should not smell or taste it. And I have had good goat cheese, but there's a difference.
There is, definitely. Okay, last question, and then I do still want to ask you our rapid fire round questions.
Yes.
And that is, let's say that somebody is intrigued by our conversation. We gave them some places where they can look for maybe more like product type swaps. But let's say that somebody wants to look into finding a functional medicine doctor. In your experience, how did you do that? How did you find the right one? Was it trial and error? What should somebody look for?
So we had been to some different naturopaths in the past, but they're all all of those different holistic specialties are a little bit different. I am a really big believer in functional medicine. You can go to, it's www.ifm, it's the Institute for Functional Medicine.org. You can search your area and find providers that way. I still think it's important to kind of call them and vet them and kind of ask what their process is. I've had some friends that have gotten some testing done and they start with like hormone testing or food sensitivity tests. And I'm like, I love that you're doing that. But there's also arguably like once you clean up your gut and get your inflammation out of control, your hormones are the thermostat. And so if your gut's leaking, then the thermostat's going to be way off. So like once you heal your gut, sometimes your hormones will automatically kind of level themselves out. And that when you test for certain things, it's like a glimpse in time and not like what's actually happening. So I think you need to ask their process, because if it's just, we're going to test your hormones, we're going to test for food sensitivity, we're going to make these changes, you're good to go. I honestly don't feel like that's deep enough. I think they really need to like dig into your health history, peel back the layers, find that root cause and help you heal from there. You also shouldn't be on like a ton of supplements forever. Like I was on a lot for a while, but now I'm like on a very minimal kind of maintenance thing. And I'm to the point where I kind of know what my body needs when I need it. So I think you just need to ask a lot of questions and see how comprehensive they are. Like I really think this functional medicine journey kind of starts in your gut. And so if they're not addressing your gut health, then maybe kind of ask around from there. We got so lucky because there was this great provider kind of right out our back door, 40 minutes away. And we just heard about it from Levi's aunt. It was like totally just so lucky that we have that here in Nebraska.
That is awesome. Well, and honestly, you gave a fabulous advice for anybody who's kind of looking to start that journey. And again, you guys, we're not suggesting that you leave modern medicine and move all the way over to functional medicine. Like you heard from both Jena and I, we believe in, like for us personally, for what works for her family and my family, it may not work for your family, but just having a blend of both has worked really well.
You mentioned this early on, and I did want to touch on it because, like you said, I am trained in modern medicine as a labor nurse. And so I learned all of the modern medicine things. So I feel like when I started going into functional medicine, I almost felt like I was cheating on modern medicine. But I was asking a lot of questions and not just blindly believing anything. And I don't know if it was people actually saying things or me assuming, like people that I worked with or good doctors I had relationships with, like, oh, she's seeing that quack doctor. I don't know if they were ever actually saying that, but sometimes that's how it feels when you're in that modern medicine world. But it was like, I don't care. I feel better. My family's better. I feel like so much of the population doesn't know what feeling good feels like. And once you know what truly feeling good feels like you can never go back to how it was before. So I did wrestle a lot with this divide between holistic medicine and modern medicine. And I had to unlearn some things and relearn some things. Tylenol is kind of a beast of its own. I used to be that mom that the second my kid got a fever, it was like, oh, they need Tylenol. They need this. They need that. The more I learned, the fever is a really good natural response. It means your immune system is working well. Your body's trying to fight something off. And we're kind of taught as moms to just be scared and treat that. But then you're suppressing your body's chance to fight that off. So I am now the mom where if my kid's eating and drinking, and they can sleep okay, I'm not even going to really treat the fever. But the really frustrating thing is most Tylenol, ibuprofen for kids has dye in it. It's a bright color. It's flavored. Even my baby, Walker, he's 18 months old now. But when he was 8 months old, he got a bad ear infection and he just had a fever. I couldn't kick the natural way. And so I ended up taking him in and they prescribed him an antibiotic for an ear infection, which most ear infections are viral. So I was like, I don't know why you're giving him an antibiotic, but I'm going to fill it to just humor myself. I'm probably not going to give it to him. I go to fill it. The only option is one with red dye in it. And I was like, do you have an option without red dye? No, we'd have to order it in from a bigger city. It would take 3 days. And I'm like, so my infant's sick and you want me to put this toxin in his body? I have a lot of qualms with it. But there are brands where you can get even the off brands. I know Target's brand has options without dye. Equate, the Walmart brand, has options without dye. And then Genexa is another medicine brand where you can find Tylenol and ibuprofen and have them on hand for your kids without the dye. If you're a parent and your kid has ever been under anesthesia and then needed a painkiller of any kind, they got their tubes in their ears or got their tonsils taken out, kids coming out of anesthesia is already a scary thing. They just react really crazy. And then a lot of times you're giving them these painkillers that have dye in it. So it's they're already vulnerable and then you put that and then they act crazy. I know a lot of moms whose kids have gotten their tonsils out and they're like, I just can't even give them their meds. It's crazy. But then they try the one without the dye and it's their body reacts a lot differently to it. So I don't use Tylenol very often because it depletes your body's glutathione and then kind of suppresses the immune response. It doesn't really set your body up for success. So if I do give a fever or reducer or painkiller, it's definitely ibuprofen just because, especially with MTHFR, my body can't process the Tylenol as well. And it just honestly, in my opinion, does more harm than good in some situations. I'm not saying never use these fever reducers or analgesics, but it is important for me to make sure that the ones that I do have when I need it, they are dye-free.
Yeah, again, I'm the same way and becoming more so.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you guys, we're not giving you advice. Jena is telling you what she does for her family because the whole point of this show in this specific episode is go find answers for yourself. I want to empower you, the listener, to go do your own research. Maybe it's not a health thing. Maybe it's a completely different journey. Maybe it's a financial thing, or maybe it's an education thing. Whatever it is, go find your own answers. Just because somebody has told you something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong either. But just go empower yourself to do more research, find answers, and then be willing to try things, trial and error, to find what works for you and your family in whatever decision you are making, whether it is food related, whether it is medicine related, or whatever it may be. That is really what I hope that you take away from today's episode.
Yes, I agree. 100%. Be your own advocate.
Okay, so real quick, we're going to go to the rapid fire round. What's the best piece of business or personal advice you've ever been given?
So as far as business advice, I'd say, what are you doing today to get you closer to where you want to be tomorrow? I mean, these successful companies aren't built overnight. It's good baby steps every single day. For personal, sorry, I want to answer both. Don't borrow worry.
I love it.
It's a crazy world that we live in. There's a lot going on. It's easy. I'm a 6 on the Enneagram, if you're familiar with that. It's easy for me to worry. And I've had to learn, like, there's a lot going on in the world. I could worry about all the crazy stuff happening right now. But what do I need to do? I need to wake up today and I need to serve my family and serve the Lord. And those little babies are the only ones coming to heaven with me. So I need to focus on them and stop borrowing worry from the world.
That is some powerful advice on both fronts. So this is a little bit different. If you could give people any words of wisdom and you knew that they would take them to heart, what would it be?
I kind of said part of this in the last question, but we're not living for this life. I'm a believer. And so my kids are the only thing I could lead to heaven. So I really need to live accordingly. So I would say it's easy to get caught up in the crazy of the world. Like, are you living accordingly to the next life?
Oh, that is good. That is so good. If you could go to dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick?
So I would actually pick my grandpa. On my dad's side, my grandpa Wendell. I never met him, but he was a farmer, a really good progressive farmer for his age. He was the president of Nebraska Farm Bureau for a long time. He was really well respected, but I never got to meet him. And I get emotional about it sometimes, but I would just love to talk farm talk with my grandpa now.
Oh, that is who, when I had to answer these at one time, that's who I picked, my paternal grandpa, who I'd never met in life. So we have that in common. Okay, what is a quote that you lead your life by?
Your body believes in everything your mind tells it to, so you really need to choose wisely what you're thinking. That's something I think about a lot because, I mean, I work really hard to nourish my body, but like, am I nourishing my thoughts as well? Because that can have a direct effect on my mental and my physical and my emotional health. Yeah,
it is. Like, your thoughts can be poison if you allow them to be.
Absolute poison.
Okay, last question for you. Let's talk favorite things. Do you have a favorite book, podcast, program, service? Maybe it's your Peloton. Maybe it's a life hack, like something that you just want to share with people because you want more people to know about it. It's been life-changing to you in some way.
Yes, I do love my Peloton, but I'm not going to say that. The 5-minute journal, it's a gratitude journal where just in the morning you ask you 3 things you're thankful for, 3 things that would make today great, and then a daily affirmation. And then at the end of the day, you put what are 3 highlights of the day and what did you learn today? And I resisted practicing gratitude for a really long time, but I told you about that state of overwhelm and all-time low I got in, finally getting to the point, because I was like, oh, I can just think grateful thoughts. It's bullcrap. When you're overwhelmed, you're not thinking grateful thoughts, but like physically writing them down has been really game-changing for me. It seems silly the first time you do it, but you just get used to it. And if you build that resilience, and when you're in really hard times, you can stay resilient and still be thankful when things are really hard and overwhelming.
Oh, that was the perfect way to round out today's episode. You guys, I will make sure that we link that in the show notes so that you can go find it, because I think we all probably need to, no matter how good you are at practicing gratitude, it is something you can always get better at. Jena, thank you so much for today. This has been a wonderful conversation. I know you guys out there had takeaways, so please do us a favor. Go follow Jena. Jena, actually, where can people go follow you if they want to?
Yeah, absolutely. So my main platform is Instagram. It's at Jena Ochsner. You'll just have to put it because I have one N in my name and Ochsner's super German. It's hard to spell, but at Jena Ochsner on Instagram. I have a Facebook and a YouTube as well, but I'm not really that present there. Like, Instagram's definitely a good place to find me. And then, like you mentioned before, Beyond the Crops podcast, and then the Beyond the Crops Instagram page as well.
And then if somebody wants to go buy some beef, where can they go do that?
Yes, I do sell our beef, ship it to all 50 states. Shop.double-o-farms.com. The word double, the letter O, farms.com.
Oh, Jena, this has been awesome. Thank you guys. But yes, please share this with your friends. If there's somebody who's maybe struggling with their health or some kind of issue and you feel like they could benefit from the show, I know there are those people out there. Please do us a favor, share it with them. And you guys know you can find us back here next week with another episode of Leaders of the West. We'll see you then. If you loved this episode, do us a favor and share it with someone else who might find just as much value in it as you did. We're on a mission to continue to grow and strengthen the future of agriculture and Western industries, and you spreading the word helps us make more of a positive impact. It also makes a big difference when you take a minute to go rate and review the show. We can't thank you enough for listening, for sharing, and for loving Ag and Western as much as we do. We'll see you back here for our next episode.